Live from Washington, D.C., it's The Larry King Show. The Larry King Show features interviews with interesting guests, telephone calls from across North America, and is a presentation of the Mutual Broadcasting System. And now the host of the program, here's Larry.
Thank you very much, Paul. Good evening on this Friday night, Saturday morning, start of another night of the Larry King Show, wind up of another week. Our special guest tonight, a return visit from Pete Best. Mr. Best, the original Beatles drummer. He is here for the New England Beatles Convention, which takes place next weekend in New Haven. We'll give you more details on that. He's also beginning the start of a new concept of lecture tours at the nation's colleges. We'll give you details on that. There is always Beatlemania in this country. Pete Best was one of the original Beatles. Indeed, as we remember the story, Pete was the original reason people used to go watch the Beatles. He was like the heartthrob of the youngsters. Peter Best is now a bureaucrat. He is director of personnel in Liverpool, England. We'll meet Pete in a moment. We welcome to our microphones an original Beatle, Pete Best. And if I remember last time, might be a good idea if you want to call in early at 703-685-2177. What do you do at these Beatles conventions?
I'm appearing and talking to the public, Larry.
You get up and answer questions?
Yeah, I would talk about the early days in the history of the Beatles and what I'm doing now, and then we turn it into a question and answer session. So people can ask a personal question, get a personal answer direct from myself, you know.
An original?
Yeah, and we play music. And
what do you do in Liverpool? What is your job?
My actual job is supervisor in charge of an administration section dealing with a long-term unemployment problem. And I've got about...
You mean people get unemployment insurance, they come to you?
Not quite that. I'm more on the side of trying to fix them back, rehabilitate them, put them back into an employment program again. You know, people who've been out of work for a very long time.
You've been doing this how long?
I've been working with the civil service since 1969. But this particular program I've been working on has been running about 2 years. It was a new government initiative. So it's quite exciting. It's quite a challenge at the present.
You like it?
Oh, yeah. You meet new people, different types of people from all, different types of walks of life.
But what a difference from your earlier life, huh?
Yeah, you could turn around and say that. The funny thing was, when I actually tried to step out of show business, which was in 1968, I thought it'd be dead easy to get a job. And I'd say, I had the educational qualifications, and I sort of went and applied for jobs and filled in the application forms. And when I had the interview, they sort of turned around and said, well, Pete, what have you been doing since 1960? And I'd turn around and say, been in show business, playing drums, traveling the world. You've got the educational qualifications, but you've been bitten by the show business bug. So, to prove to people that, I wanted to turn over a new leaf, I got a job as a bakehouse labourer. And I was racking bread, shifting bread, slicing bread, loading vans, anything, working shifts. And I stayed at that for 12 months. And then the civil service turned around and offered me a job. That was in 1969.
As I remember from the last time, I think you were still a little ticked. Were you not? You could have been a billionaire.
Yeah,
should have been.
Unquote, yeah.
Let's go back.
Uh-huh.
You were part of when the Beatles formed?
That's right, yeah. I actually joined them in August 1960. They'd formed most probably a year beforehand. They'd call themselves the Silver Beatles.
Silver Beatles?
Yeah, I'd got to know them before that, when they opened my mother's club, the Casbah in Liverpool, when they played as the Quarrymen with another guy called Ken Brown. But I'd known them for a couple of years before I actually joined the band, and I joined the band in August 1960.
And it was you and John?
John, Paul, George, and another guy called Stu Sutcliffe.
What does he do? What did he do?
Stu used to play bass.
So you were 5?
We were 5 originally. That was the funny thing.
And then he left and you were 4?
Stu left in 1961. He was a brilliant artist, and he fell madly in love with a German girl when we were over in Hamburg. And he stayed with us up till about April 1961. And when we went back to Germany to play at the Top 10 Club, he'd been tossing the idea around in his head, because his first love was art. And he had the offer to go back to the Hamburg College of Art. And that's what he did.
How did he turn out?
Unfortunately, Stu died. He died very tragically about 12 months later of a brain hemorrhage. But as regards painting, brilliant painter.
Now, you were with the Beatles how long then?
2 years to the day, virtually, Larry.
That you joined them?
Yeah,
why did you leave?
Wasn't a case of leaving.
They booted you, right?
I got the grand order of the boot from the Beatles.
Because, as I understand it, you were the drawing card. Women, you were kind of came to see you, and you packed him in Germany, and was that the truth?
Well, people turned around and said this to me afterwards, okay, and a lot of people believe that it was, in view of the fact that, okay, my drawing power was taking over the group and dominating the group, that it was starting to create jealousy amongst the other members. And people have turned around and said that that may have been one of the main contributing factors to On Your Way, Pete.
Did Brian Epstein fire you?
It was left up to Brian, yeah. The other boys weren't there at my actual dismissal, but Brian was the conveyor of the bad news.
Had you recorded with them?
I'd recorded. We'd done all the material in Germany with Tony Sheridan and our own, German releases. We'd recorded Decca Audition material, which unfortunately we didn't get the recording contract. But we'd also recorded the first intake of Love Me Do when they got the recording contract with EMI. And there's quite a funny story to that particular one, because in between doing the original tracks for Love Me Do, which was 6th of June 1962, he was supposed to go back and put the finishing touches to it, and that was going to be sometime in August or September. Well, as history portrays now, I got the order of the boot, in August. And it was Ringo who went back, right? And George Martin, who was the A&R man at that time, turned round and said, "Where's Pete?" Because he wasn't, didn't know there was going to be a change in the group. And they turned around and said, "Oh, well, Pete's left. You'd had enough. You wanted to leave the band." So he listened to Ringo playing, and he wasn't too impressed. And, Ringo made a version of Love Me Do. The following week, he brought in a guy called Andy White, who was the session drummer. And in view of the fact that he wasn't happy with Ringo's drumming, he recorded another version of Love Me Do. So there's 3 versions of Love Me Do out. When George Martin's been put on the spot and turned around and said, which version is it? Is it Pete's version? Is it Ringo's version? Is it Andy White's version?
What's the answer?
He says he doesn't know. Simply because the fact it's been mixed and re-edited that
Do
many
you know?
times. I wish I did, to be quite honest. Because, well, let's be honest about it. There might be a few bob in there for me somewhere along the line.
Our guest is Pete Best. This might well be called What Might Have Been. Next weekend, he'll attend the New England Beatles convention. It's being put on at the Park Plaza Hotel in New Haven. He's also touring American colleges. We'll tell you more about that. If you want to talk to Pete Best, it's 703-685-2177. 703-685-2177. We'll be back after these messages. Our guest is the original Beatles drummer, Pete Best, who is here for the New England Beatles convention. He's also touring colleges with music and discussion periods. If you want information on that, the number is 216-974-9100. That's 216-974-9100. I don't want to say that Beatlemania always exists, but all of our lines are going, except, well, 1 or 2, and we'll start getting to calls a little early because this is a return visit for Pete Best. How long after you left did they have a hit?
Virtually about 30 days after I left.
Which was?
Love Me Do. That took them into the English charts. Didn't get to number 1, but it took them up to around about 17, which was a good effort for the first one.
So you were a little ticked?
Yeah.
Then? Then what?
Then Please Please Me came out, and that took them to number 1, and that would be around about January of 1963.
Then you were very ticked?
Then I was very ticked, yeah.
And then when were you super ticked?
When they became the Fab Four as the world knows them today.
What record did that? Was there a record that did that?
I think it was going to be I Want to Hold Your Hand. That was the one which I think, as regards the American releases, was tended to be one of the first releases over here.
Now, when that was out and a worldwide hit, and they're now coming over to the States and going on Ed Sullivan, what were you doing?
I was still blasting away with my own band, trying to follow them as fast and furious as I could.
What was the name of your group?
My band was the Pete Best Four. Okay. We had a recording contract with Decca, but the gulf was widening. I mean, they were going like shooting stars. I mean, it was incredible, and all you could do was just sort of turn around and say, fine, let's persevere with my own career, and let's see how far we can get with it,
I mean, like, everywhere you go, you heard them, right?
Sure.
You hear them on the radio, the mania.
TV.
You lived in Liverpool, the Liverpool story, the television, it wouldn't stop, right? You had to go crazy. I mean, any normal person would have gone berserk.
It did. I mean, I'll be quite honest, Larry. There was a time when I attempted to take my life. Okay, I'll be perfectly honest about that. It's been accounted for in the book. And that was simply because of the fact, depression sets in. It wasn't planned or anything like that. It just, one fateful night you turn around and say, okay, I'm going to do away with myself. But fortunately enough, my brother saved me. And he gave me a good talking to, and my mother as well. And he turned around and said, what the hell's up with you, Pete? You still got your own life to live. You've got a lovely wife, you've got a lovely daughter to look afterwards. And I think they put me back on the straight and narrow again.
Did you ever run into them at all, ever again?
I played with them on the same bill on 2 occasions, very
No
shortly
kidding.
after I was kicked out, yeah. They were top of the bill. And I joined a band called Lee Curtis and the All Stars, who were most probably at that time the most up-and-coming band in Liverpool, next to the Beatles. And the funny thing was, as we were coming off stage, they were going on stage. Nothing was mentioned. The shades were down. There was no acknowledgement. And basically from that day to this, they've gone their way, and I've gone my way.
Which one of them was your best friend, or did you like the best?
I liked all of them, but the closest was John Lennon, that was for sure.
Yeah. Now you go to Beatles conventions,
Mhm.
Beatlemania. People talk to you about it. You tour. You wrote a book about them.
Yeah.
You're going to go on the color circuit. So obviously all that's over with now. You're
Sure. As it's in, and as you mentioned before, yeah, tick, resentment, heartache. But there comes a period in your life when you've got to turn around and say, put it behind you, And I think that happened when I finally realised, okay, I wanted to step out of show business. And it was something which I turned around and said, look, regardless of what's happened, turn over a new leaf, put it behind you. Because you can't live that way. I mean, if you keep thinking about it all the time, you're going to end up bitter and twisted.
So
And
as
that's not
long
my
as you
style.
stayed in show business, it was bad.
It was coming up all the time.
Yeah, but it was
reoccurring.
easier once you left.
It was,
Oh.
yeah.
You technically, Ringo's not a good drummer, is he?
No, well, I've always said I was better than Ringo anyway. So.
But musicians, experts used to say that he was if there was a weak link in the Beatles,
Mhm.
it was Ringo. So that's would have burned you a little more, right?
Well,
At least if they didn't hire Buddy Rich.
it would have been interesting if they had. I'd like to have seen it. But I think that was one of the annoying factors. Was they turned around and said, okay, my drumming wasn't good enough. That was one of the predominant reasons they put out at that time. And when I turned around and saw that it was Ringo who would replace me, then yeah, it didn't make sense as far as I was concerned.
But you no longer exhibit pain when you hear recordings.
No, I've never exhibited pain. I mean, it's given me, a few headaches. But I appreciate the music. Don't get me wrong on that particular basis. But there's certain songs which I like and certain songs which I don't like. Let's put it that way.
Well, I tell you what. We're going to take calls from the public. We'll be giving out the numbers. We'll let you know how you can go to the Beatles convention.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, you and I will share a Bayer aspirin, okay? He'll be in New Haven next weekend, will Pete Best, the original Beatles drummer, at the Beatles convention, and then he's going to make an appearance at Western Kentucky University. If you want information on next weekend, the big Beatle weekend in New Haven, it's 203-865-8131, and I know they get people come from all over the country for this. 203-865-8131. We're ready to go to your phone calls for Pete Best, Laurel, Maryland. Hello.
Yes. When you were first playing in Liverpool, and did you have any feeling that the whole Mersey beat sound and the Beatles were going to be so popular all over the world?
I don't think so much the Mersey beat sound. We had an inner belief in the band itself, even from our early days in Hamburg, that we were going to make it big. And I think making it big, the projection we had at that time was to get a #1 record to the top of the English charts.
You were a hit in Germany, though, right?
Yeah.
The Beatles were popular in Germany.
Very, very popular, yeah.
Burbank, California. Hello.
Yeah, Larry, you're dead wrong about Ringo not being a great drummer. There's an interview with Steve Gadd, who's Paul Simon's drummer, and with Phil Collins, who states that Ringo has perfect timing and that the slow tom fills he introduced on Sgt. Pepper's were a major innovation in rock drumming. And
Well, I'm not an expert on it. I'm just telling you what musicologists told me. So I was just repeating what I read. I don't know anything about music.
wrong because I studied music at UCLA, and
All right, well, let Pete respond.
Okay, I'll take that one over. I know a lot of people have turned around and said he has perfect timing. Everyone makes a decision on that, makes their own mind up. There's different styles and different ways of playing things.
thank you.
All right,
Okay.
onward to Athens, Georgia with Pete Best. Hello.
Yeah, this is Rob. I'm a first-time caller. Pete, I've been a big fan of the Beatles for a while. I've read Shout and everything, and was quite impressed by your mother in that book. But I'd like to get your impression on the Beatles' music, as they went on to be not necessarily the cultural phenomenon, but their music. And you said Lennon was the one you were closest to.
Mm-hmm.
What were your impressions of the man, and how did you feel the day he died? I'll hang up and listen on the radio.
Okay, there's quite a few questions in there, but I'll take the last one first, Rob. The way I felt when he actually died December 8th was, it was sick. Because what a lot of people forgot was that I'd known this guy for 4 years, regardless of what happened. And the way he was tragically slain was just something, it was a great loss to the show business world.
You were closer to him, yet it is said that he was the most difficult of them to know, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the funny thing was, Larry, I think this most probably answers the other part of Rob's question as well. There were two sides to John, and I was fortunate to know both sides. There was the side which the public saw, which was the rough, abrasive, ready-witted, quick-tempered person. But when I got to know him in Hamburg, and because he spent a lot of time at my house as well, there was also a very tender and a loving side to John, which the public weren't aware of.
What was their musical genius?
I think it was a conjecture of all their talents put together. Okay, you couldn't singly identify one particular person and turn around and say that was the latent talent in the band.
Well,
Everyone inputted, and it was because of the input that was there. It fused together, and it projected, and it, took the imagination of the world.
and they could write as well as perform, right? I mean,
Sure.
they will be remembered as well for their writing.
That goes without saying.
Pete Best is our guest. He'll be at the New England Beatle Convention next weekend in New Haven. He's touring America's colleges as well, and we are being flooded with phone calls. And again, if you get a busy signal, which you would now get, please hang up and call back. If you're getting a ring, just let the phone keep ringing. We do take everybody in order. Our numbers are 703-685-2177. This is the Larry King Show in Washington, and our guest is Pete Best, the original Beatles drummer. On Monday night, speaking of original, ready to go back to the calls for Pete Best, East Detroit. Hello.
Hi, guys. It's great to talk to you. I got
Thank
a couple
you.
questions for you.
Go ahead.
Do you ever remember witnessing John and Paul doing any writing in the old days?
I actually sat in when they wrote Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You. We were in Hamburg at the Star Club, and Epstein had told us we got the recording contract and to get cracking on more original material. And that was the first time I ever saw John and Paul sit down and work the lyrics out and, write the chord harmonies. And I helped fill in on the harmonica and the drum sides.
How about the Tony Sheridan recordings? You weren't on any of those, right?
I was on all of those. All the stuff which the Beatles recorded with Tony Sheridan, I was on all that material.
The Beat Brothers were a different group.
No, the Beat Brothers originally were the Beatles, but Bert Kempford, who was the A&R man at that time, turned round and said that he wanted, in view of the fact that there's a word in the German vocabulary called Beatles, which is a nickname for the male appendage, put it that way.
That's the way they were named?
Well, what he was frightened of was that people would get mixed up with the Beatles and the Beatles, right? So he turned round and said he wanted to call them the Beat Brothers, right? And that was the reason why. The early recordings are Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers, but some of the other material, Bert Kempford in his way meant that if the Beatles weren't there, then other people could record with Tony Sheridan under the pseudonym of the Beat
Tony
Brothers.
Sheridan a good talent?
He was great.
Bert Kaempfer was a terrific talent.
Smashing.
Boy,
Brilliant.
he had some big band hits.
Yeah, Wonderland by Night.
That's right. To Minneapolis. Hello.
Hi, Pete. First of all, I was wondering if you could tell us the true story of you and Paul getting deported from Hamburg, and also, Larry, if you could also add...
Okay, I don't know what that sound is. You were deported from Hamburg?
Yes, that's right.
For doing what?
Well, the alleged case which was put forward was that we attempted to burn a cinema down, which we'd been staying at.
Attempted to burn a what?
Cinema down.
Movie theater?
Movie theater, okay.
Why would you want to do that, Pete?
Well, the reason...
I mean, such a thing as not liking a film, but that's taking
basically
it to...
what it was, to put it very short and sweet, okay, we'd had the offer to go to the Top 10 Club, which was the rival club in Hamburg, and we'd moved out, and it meant that Paul and I had to go back to the back of the Bambino where we were staying. And there was no light in the back of the Bambino. I mean, there were places we were staying at were like dungeons, we'd nicknamed them the Black Holes of Calcutta, basically. And with there being no light, and the fact that we had to sneak back like burglars in the middle of the night to do it, we just happened to have a couple of condoms on us, right? As normal, healthy lads in Germany would do in those days. And in view of the fact there was no electricity, we stuck the condoms on the wall and lit fire to them, and they spluttered. And while they were spluttering, they gave us enough light, for us to throw our material into the suitcases. And we went back and played the Top 10 Club, and the following morning, we were woken up by two big German policemen and dragged off to the police station. And we were charged with attempting to burn down the Bambino, right? And we were deported, courtesy of the German government after that.
Well. Baltimore, hello.
How you doing, Pete?
Okay, how are
A
you?
lot of us have been pushing for you all these years and hope you're really cashing in on all this Beatle memorabilia, especially the prices that they're going for.
You're right. I tell you, Pete deserves it.
Thank you.
Anyway, I have two questions, too.
The first thing is about the creative process. Were you guys in the early days as experimental as the Beatles tended to turn out later and doing stuff like Rubber Soul and Revolver and stuff? And could you see ahead to these kind of creative experimental things?
In our own sweet way, yeah. I mean, sort of putting along the same parallels you've done. We wouldn't have projected that far, but I mean, we were always experimenting with a new
Whereas
sound.
the Beatles were always a little revolutionary,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, even in the early days.
Second question.
The second question is, a lot of the early Liverpool drummers were just like background drummers, and then the music changed sort of when Keith Moon came out with The Who was like more of an up-front type drummer, really major part of the band. Was that more the kind of drummer you were with the Beatles?
Yeah, I tend to put it in that cliche, more powerhouse, more vocal. I played out front as opposed
That's
to
right.
just being a
In
background.
times in Germany, you were the one that they were coming to see, right?
That's
up
right.
front.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, Kearney, Nebraska, with Pete Best. He'll be at the Beatle convention in New Haven next weekend. Hello.
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
This is Pat. And, Pete, it's great to talk to you.
Nice talking to you, Pat.
And I was wondering, I've heard a lot of crazy stories about what you guys did on stage in Hamburg. And I was wondering, what was one of the funniest things you ever saw John do on stage in Hamburg?
What did John do crazy on
I think
stage?
the funniest thing I ever saw him do on stage, there used to be a piano. Everywhere you played in the clubs in Hamburg, there was always a piano static on stage. And when we used to do a number called What Did I Say, which was the great Ray Charles number, John used to get on top of the piano. And we used to wear real skin-tight jeans in those days, or leather pants, depending on what outfit we were doing. And regularly every night, John would take off like Nuria, the Russian ballerina, or the ballet dancer, I should say, and straddle over the stage. And 9 times out of 10, his pants would go for a Burton, and it'd be downstairs into the toilet. Mutty would get the darning needle out, sew them up again, and he'd be back on stage in about 5 or 10 minutes again.
Did you all have long hair?
Long by comparison in those days, yeah.
You must. I can't picture you with really long. I mean, you're. Yeah, in a very. Our guest is Pete Best, original drummer with the Beatles. He'll be next weekend in New Haven at the New England Beatles Convention. You want information on that? 203-865-8131. And if you're attending a university or involved with people who book speakers at universities, Pete is going to tour American universities. For information on that, call John Latimer at 216-974-9100. Back with Pete Best after these messages. Hendersonville, North Carolina. Hello.
Hello, Larry.
Hi.
Hello, Pete.
Hello.
I'm a first-time caller to the show. Just wanted to ask a couple of questions, and then I'll hang up and listen.
Shoot.
At the risk of sounding kind of nosy, what was your salary with the Beatles, and do you think maybe money or Ringo came to work for less money? You think that might have been one of the reasons?
Well, let's answer the first one. Our salary in those days, when we first started, was round about £7 a week, which I think is equivalent to somewhere around about $14 or $15 a week. And we pushed it up just before Ringo actually took over my drumming seat to around about £70 odd a week, around about 75. So you're talking about $150.
$150 a week.
Yeah.
Any bet? Hey, you put a little aside, save it for a rainy day. Arlington, Virginia. Hello.
Hello, Larry. Hello, Pete.
Hello.
Pete, I've seen some Australian films which listed music credits by a Peter Best, and I was wondering if that's music that you had composed.
I wish it was.
No.
I wish it was. I've done a little bit of composing, but that wasn't my title credits, no.
The Beatles from Hamburg album, is that you drumming on that album?
Is this the one that they recorded just before Christmas '62?
Yes.
No, that's Ringo.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
then.
you. Fort Colburn, Ontario. Hello.
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
Hello, Pete.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, okay.
Good.
I'd just like to tell you, as far as I'm concerned, I think it was the Beatles' loss for kicking you out and taking Ringo. I think you were the best one there, the best drummer I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And I got a couple questions for you. Recently, or in the past few years or whatever, have you ever really sat down and spoken to Ringo, or?
I haven't seen Ringo since those 2 occasions in 1962.
Did you know Ringo?
Sure,
Before he
I was
replaced you?
friends with Ringo. I knew him from, when he played in my mother's club and we were in Hamburg together.
All you guys knew each other in Liverpool, right? I mean, it was like a crowd,
It
right?
was like one big happy family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second question?
And I'd also like to ask you, have you ever been approached by either Paul McCartney or George Harrison to do some type of work together, musical work, or?
No, that's a definite no on that one as well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Milwaukee, hello.
Hi, Pete. Pleasure to talk to you.
Hi.
John Lennon used to say that the Beatles were at their best performing live in Hamburg.
Mhm.
What was it like how did it feel to play with them on stage?
Oh, it was great. I mean, whether it be Hamburg or Liverpool, whichever venue we played at, it was always a pleasure to be part of them. But I think the excitement that was there in Hamburg and the long hours and the fact that we were getting our act together, the charisma was building. They were the good days and the ones you could really look back to and turn around and say, yeah, they were the best days that we had.
Another question. You never really got into the Beatle haircut, what became known as the Beatle haircut. That was cited as one reason that you weren't kept. What's the story behind that?
Simply, I never got asked. I mean, a lot of people had turned around and got the impression that the Beatles hairstyle developed overnight. It didn't. I mean, it started way back in 1960 when Stu first combed his hair down. Then George followed suit, and then it was about 12 months afterwards when Paul and John followed suit. But the simple question was, there was no arrangements or agreement that they were going to develop it into a mop-top hairstyle. And if they'd have turned around and asked me, I'd have been a Beatle, I'd have combed my hair down. It was as simple as that.
Okay, simply asked. Blackwood, New Jersey. Hello.
Hi, Pete. Comment and a question for you. When I talk to the kids in high school now about the Beatles, they'll say, oh, you mean Paul McCartney was in a group of Four Wings? I think he was talking about Snoopy's pet parakeet, so I feel the generation gap. The question I want to ask is, 10 years ago I was in New York at the British Information Tourist Center. I picked up a brochure in Liverpool in like 6 pages, and nothing was mentioned at all about the Beatles at all. I was really surprised. When Elvis was alive in Memphis, there was very low-key in that city, too, at the time. I just wonder, for the people who want to make the pilgrimage to Liverpool, what sites can we see if we're a Beatle fan?
Yeah, if you're a Beatle fan, you go to Liverpool, what would you see?
Well, you see the Casbah, the Cabin, Strawberry Fields, birthplaces of all the boys.
Have they made that to shrines? I mean, would there be signs on the door?
Not so much signs on the door, but
no?
they are earmarked and they are put onto maps so people can, visit them apart from doing the regular tourist trips as well.
Are there signs at the airport like Liverpool, home of the Beatles?
Yeah, there's a big one at Liverpool Airport, welcoming people to it.
Pittsburgh, hello.
Hello, how you doing, Larry?
Hi.
Hi, Pete.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine. Hey, I have 2 quick questions, if I could. Number one is, the Beatles' music in general, did it come natural to them, or did they have to practice long, hard hours for this?
Well, I don't think practicing came into it an awful lot, and in view of the fact that we were playing a lot of long hours in Hamburg, we were playing 7, 8 hours a night, 7 days a week, which constitutes an awful lot of playing in those days. I think that was the rehearsals which they needed, and it was gelling the band together and any sort of practicing which we had to do. We'd throw it into a live performance and, smooth the rough edges off, simply working on that way.
And one more quick question. If I guess you've thought about it a lot, but if you had a chance to do it all over again, would you have done anything different?
No. I'd have done it exactly the same.
Atlanta, hello.
Yes, Atlanta?
Yep.
Yeah, this is, Pete, it's a pleasure to talk to you again, actually. I have 2 quick questions. First, I understand you'll be playing drums at the New England Beatles Convention, and given I appreciate the historical perspective you've had with the Beatles, and just wondering exactly what tunes you might be playing with the Beatles. And the second question is, I think you kind of partially answered that, the status of the Casbah Club. I remember last time you mentioned that on the show that you may be opening that up again with your mother. And I'm just curious.
Okay, let's do them important by one. You playing drums next weekend?
Well, it's the first I know about it.
You're not?
Not that I know of.
Okay, and what about the Casbah?
Casbah has reopened again. It opened August of last year, and we've been very successful with it. And
it's your baby?
Part of it. It's a family concern, but we all contribute.
We'll be right back with Pete Best, an original Beatle, after this message.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog.
You're listening to The Larry King Show, live from Washington, D.C. Here again, Larry King.
With Pete Best, did they divide the money equally?
In those days?
Yeah.
Yes, it was always an equal
They
split.
probably always did, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, we go to Eureka, California with Pete Best. Hello.
Yeah, it's a good show. I was just wondering, as far as I know, the Beatles have recorded about a half a dozen versions of a song called Across the Universe, and I'm just wondering if you might know exactly how many they did record, Pete.
I wish I could answer that one for you. Unfortunately, I just don't know the answer.
Did they record many? Have you heard the song?
There's quite a few versions of it, yes. But how many, actually, I don't know.
Waltham, Massachusetts. Hello.
Yes, Peter Best. I have followed you and the Beatles from the very beginning. I have one question for you.
Uh-huh.
But I would like to say this. As long as the story of the Beatles is written, the history followed, you will always be remembered, because I have seen your name come up so many times. They'll always remember you. And if that's any consolation to you at all.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I appreciate it.
My question to you is, the Beatles folded up before, I think, the middle 1970s, ahead of many of the bands that preceded them. Why did you think that they folded up so quickly?
I don't think it was a case of folding up that quickly. I think the inner fractures and the strains and stresses were starting to take the toll on the boys and the family lives. And it was a case of, I think it happened as far as the public were concerned, I'll say basically overnight. 1 minute they were together, the next minute the band had disbanded. But there'd been signs of stress and tear going on for quite some time before that.
Falls Church, Virginia, for Pete Best. Hello.
Yes, good evening. I'm a first-time caller, and I had two questions.
Sure.
I've always been curious. I heard Ringo, as far as vocally, he was quite a strong presence in the group, and I was wondering how Pete compares vocally. I've never heard any mention of him and his singing ability to Ringo.
Did you do the same thing he did?
I've done vocals on, stage before. So in those days, drummers used to sort of, they didn't end up as frontline singers, but we sort of contributed and did a couple of numbers each.
Okay, and then my second question was kind of, you mentioned earlier this evening in retrospect that you would do it exactly the same, but I'm curious if you've ever perhaps considered that, considering what has happened to the other members of the band, that perhaps maybe you are better off and, in the position that you're in today.
There's always two sides to the coin, and that's one of the compensations for, the tragedy which befell me many years ago. I can, retain my anonymity. I've got a good family life. I've got a good social life. And a lot of those things, compensate for what actually happened many years ago.
And you deserve whatever you can make out of this now.
Well, I'm trying.
Boston, hello.
Hello, Larry.
Hi.
Pete.
Hi, how you doing?
It's a privilege to speak to you, Pete. Do you still play drums either professionally or hobby?
I play for fun now, let's put it that way. I'll go down into the cellar now and again and work out just to keep in shape, basically.
Going on the road with an oldies or nostalgia band or anything like that?
Well, there's a couple of offers which have sort of been put my way, but we'll have to sort of give them a bit of thought. And if it's meant that Pete's going to pick up the sticks again and go back into show business, then, fate's already decreed it for me. So I'll just fall into line with whatever's going on.
Well, that's all I wanted to talk about. It was nice to talk to you, Pete.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. We're with Pete Best, New York City. Hello. Turn the radio down. New York City. Hello.
Hello, Pete.
Yep, go ahead.
This is Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Listen, I was just wondering, was Ringo an overnight decision or what?
I don't really know, because the circumstances which, the way it happened, it was an overnight decision as far as I was getting the boot, because I was in one night and out the following morning. How long it had been going on before, Dan? I just don't know. Maybe on for a couple of weeks, a couple of months.
Did you know of Epstein's emotional problems?
Yes, we were all aware of that.
From New York to Arlington. Hello.
Hey, good morning, Larry. How you doing?
Hi.
Hey, a couple of questions for Pete there, if he can answer these. There's a group out of Nova Scotia that does a Pink Floyd rendition. They're called Clearlight. Was wondering if he had ever heard of that group, and also what transpired Paul McCartney to do Michelle, because I named my oldest, she's my oldest daughter now, she's 19. I named her Michelle, and I'll hang up and listen to the answer.
What inspired Michelle?
I really don't know. I mean, Paul's most probably the guest guy to give you the answer for that particular one.
What about the other group he mentioned?
I've never heard of them before, no.
Stratford, Connecticut. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Larry. I'd ask Pete a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay, I was wondering if your relationship with Paul McCartney, what it was like. And the second one is how we actually joined the Beatles.
Okay, first one. Relationship with Paul was okay. Everyone was friends within the band. If Paul was hiding any emotional problems as regards jealousy or, people might be challenging him for the leadership of the group or the figurehead of the group, as I should turn around and say, he never showed it. He sort of kept it to himself. And how I actually joined the band was very simple. I had a band called the Blackjacks, which followed suit after the Quarrymen left the club, because the Beatles were the Quarrymen when they first started playing at the Casbah. And Paul knew that I was playing drums, and he gave me a phone call one night and turned around and said we had the offer to go to Germany, and would I be prepared to join the band? And I turned around and said yes, because I knew the band I had was only a fun band. They were going back to university and taking up regular jobs. So he said, okay, come down the following morning, Pete, and we'll give you an audition. So he went down to the Wyvern Club, and we blasted off about 6 numbers, and 10 minutes later I was a Beatle, And 2 days after that, we were on our way to Hamburg. It happened that quick.
They were called the Quarrymen originally?
Originally, yes. Uh-huh.
Our guest is Pete Best. This weekend, Pete Best will appear at the New England Beatles Convention. That's next weekend, rather. The 27th, 28th, and 29th in New Haven, Connecticut. If you want information on that, it's 203-865-8131. Pete is also in the midst of a college lecture series tour. He's going to go on there to Western Kentucky University. If you want information on the college lecture series or in arranging for him to appear at your university, call John Latimer at 216-974-9100. That's 216-974-9100. And for information on the New England Beatles Convention, that's in New Haven, Connecticut, next weekend, it's 203-865-8131. Our guest, an original Beatle, Pete Best. We're going to pause now for news on the hour. A word from your local stations. We'll be back with a full hour of phone calls for Pete Best. Just a couple, and we're going to get right back to your phone calls. Port Huron, Michigan. Hello.
Oh, yes, this is Harvey. And I was wondering if Pete could answer a question for me.
Go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering if he was with the group when John Lennon's mother got struck by that car and got killed.
No, Harv, I wasn't. I was aware of it, but I hadn't actually joined the band then.
Oakland, California. Hello.
Yes, I understand Mr. Best was a consultant on Birth of the Beatles. I'd like his opinion on the final outcome of that production and how accurate was it. Thank you.
All right.
Well, put in a nutshell, I was a consultant on it. It typified what was happening in the early days of the Beatles, okay, and it hit on the sort of the chronology in the right order. And it took artistic license, which you expect with films to do. But my own personal point of view is that if they'd have kept about 20 minutes of the footage, which I sure cut from the film, actually, kept it in, it would have made it a little bit better and explained some of the lead-up and consequential events which took place.
Salt Lake City for Pete Best. Hello.
How are you doing?
Hi.
Incidentally, for that caller, there are 4 versions of Across the Universe. Only 2 have ever been released publicly.
Okay.
However, anyway, Pete, I'm an avid collector. I have some albums featuring you.
Mm-hmm.
Did you make any money off of those?
Fair question.
I'll give you a fair answer on that. No.
Not.
Because a lot of the albums, which, if you're a collector or anything like that, they were either stuff which was bootleg from the, the Decca audition tapes, the German material where we were only paid as session man, and the stuff which was released in America, we never were able to track it down. So, no, we're not getting any royalties from it at the present moment.
Have you done anything solo yourself?
Since I was kicked out, or recently.
Well, anytime, yeah.
Oh, solo-wise, yeah. I've had singles out and, cuts from different LPs. We've had a couple of LPs out as well.
Tacoma, Washington for Pete Best. Hello.
Hi, I'm so glad I could get through. I have so many things I could ask, but I'll limit myself to one question. Pete, I saw a movie, I forget the title, something Rain, that was on TV here, and it portrayed John Lennon as a guy that was always telling you guys, we're going to be at the top, the very top. Is that an accurate portrayal?
The actual expression was the toppermost of the poppermost. It was
You
cut
used to
down.
say that?
That's right, yeah. It was a group chant we had on stage. Really took its rise in Hamburg. And John would sort of turn around and say, where we going, guys? And we'd all stand up and go to the toppermost of the poppermost.
John believed it.
Sure, we all did, yeah.
Washington, hello.
Hi. This is Washington, D.C., and I'm calling. It was my duty to say hello from one Scouse to another. I live in Washington, but I was born and raised in Birkenhead, and I'm a big Beatle fan. I came over here in 1964. My questions are, what was the name of the Beatle who was in Germany who died? The one who had the German girlfriend?
Yeah, we mentioned him earlier. What was
that?
His
Was
name?
Stuart Sutcliffe.
Oh, yes. And I know you're going to say this is way after my time and everything, but I was curious because she was in D.C. recently. What do you think, even if you'll say as a member of the public, as we all are, about Yoko?
She's been on this show a lot. She's been a terrific guest. As a guest, what do you think of her?
As a person, she looks a very nice type of person to meet.
She runs that show, though, doesn't she?
Sure, yeah, I can imagine.
Yoko's tough lady. Akron, Ohio, hello.
Oh, hello. I'm from Akron, Ohio. I'd like to speak to Pete Best.
Go right ahead.
Pete?
Hello.
Hello, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure, believe me.
Yes, it's really a thrill. I have a big book of the Beatles with a lot of your pictures in it, and it's really a treasure to me.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, Will you be coming to Akron, Ohio again?
Well, I hope so. If you can talk to any people over there in the Cleveland area and they want to do any conventions, tell them to get in touch with me or John, and I'll definitely make an appearance there. I'd love to.
That John, by the way, is John Latimer in Cleveland at 216-974-9100. 216-974-9100. Can you get time away from Liverpool?
As long as I know up front, Larry, yeah. We can make arrangements for it and take care of it.
So you can schedule in advance and use time accrued. If you want information on next weekend's big convention in New Haven, the New England Beatle Convention at the Park Plaza Hotel, the 27th, 28th, 29th, you call 203-865-8131. That's 203-865-8131. This is the Larry King Show in Washington with Pete Best. We'll be back after these messages. Madison, Wisconsin, for Pete Best. Hello.
Hello. Hey, Pete.
Hi.
Listen, tonight the big question to me is why you were dropped. And what I want to know is which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was it Brian Epstein who did you in, or was it the Beatles? And why, if it was Brian Epstein, why didn't you just tell him to shove it? You were their friend.
To try and give you the answer to that one, okay. I mean, they left it up to Brian.
But you think it was them, not Brian?
Yeah. I mean, I think what makes me sort of go back to, saying it wasn't Brian's fault is that a couple of weeks afterwards, Brian got in touch with me and I said, Pete, I've got another band in Liverpool I'm interested in making into a second Beatles. Would you be prepared to join them? And that, as far as I was concerned, looked as though, okay, he hadn't been part of actually getting out. He still wanted to retain me as a member of his stable, so to speak.
Moreno Valley, California, for Pete Best. Hello.
Hello. Pete.
Hiya.
This is a blast from the past.
Okay.
It's a long way from the Mardi Gras on a Tuesday night.
I'm listening to the voice, and I'm trying to pinpoint it. Go on.
Fellow drummer. First name Peter.
Yeah.
Pete Clark.
Hiya, Pete. How you doing?
How you? I'm really glad that you're doing okay, man.
You two knew each other back when?
I think we rubbed sticks a couple of times, didn't we?
Yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you got something out of it, and I listen to the show quite a bit, and, it's just nice. And how about if I call John Latimer early part of next week, get in touch?
Uh-huh.
Sure, that's the way to do it. John Latimer's number, by the way, is 216-974-9100. With Pete Best, Winston, Salem, North Carolina. Hello.
Hello, Larry.
Hi.
Pete.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. I had a fantastic parallel that I thought about between you and Glenn Campbell.
What was that?
Well, there was a group called the Champs in the early 50s that made one big hit, and called Tequila.
I remember.
Glenn Campbell was a background musician in that, and he rose above that. And you were an integral part of another group that had more than one great hit. But yet I put a parallel between you and Glenn Campbell, and how do you put yourself in that perspective?
Well, I think it'll be a case of que sera, sera. If it's meant to be, it'll be. So I don't sort of make any hard and fast plans about that.
What might have been. Kearney, Nebraska, hello.
Hi, Pete and Larry. I have a question for both of you. What is your favorite Beatles song and why? And who do you think came out with the best material after the breakup? And Pete, do you feel that Paul was trying to portray himself as a godlike figure in the documentary Let It Be?
Wow, there's a lot of questions in there.
Now, let's run down quick. Do you think he was trying to be godlike?
In a way, yes. Okay.
Your favorite Beatles song?
Saw It Standing There. That's got to be my favorite.
I like Something in the Way She Moves. Is that it? Something in the Way?
Mm-hmm.
And another one that's nice is Hey Jude. I like Hey Jude.
You got good choices.
And what's the one about the graveyard?
Eleanor Rigby.
Eleanor Rigby. You know who sang it better than them?
Who was that?
Tony Bennett. Yeah, you laugh. Tony Bennett, he sings normal. New York City. Hello.
Well, hello, Pete. It's certainly a pleasure to hear from you.
It's my pleasure, believe me.
Now, as a freelance writer, it's great that you're out here for Larry and all the people and talking about the Beatles, but there's a lot of us that love the records you made after you left.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if it would ever be possible to talk with you, a brief interview, to ask about those records.
Well, sure, why don't you call him next weekend in New Haven at the Park Plaza Hotel. You'll be in New York this week, though, right?
That's right, we'll be in New York, yeah. That's from Monday.
Okay, we go to Bay City, Michigan. Hello.
Are you familiar with the Magical Mystery Tour album?
I've heard it a couple of times, yeah.
wasn't that far out incredible imagination to make that album? You know, there I guess just a suggestion. Why don't you have Paul McCartney sometime come on your show?
We've tried. So far, he says no. Austin, Texas. Hello.
Hello, Larry.
Hi.
How are y'all doing tonight?
Fine.
Pete, this may sound like a strange question, but do you have any information on where George Harrison was born and raised, and by whom he was raised? My girlfriend just has reason to believe that they may be related in some way.
Where was George born and raised?
Well, George was born and raised, as far as I'm aware, in Liverpool. You know,
By his parents?
By his parents,
Mhm.
yeah.
All right, we'll be
Okay.
right back with Pete Best after these messages. With Pete Best on the Larry King Show, Compose New York. Hello. Entire town's going to sleep. Little joke. Hello, go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, this is Kathy. First of all, I'd like to know if Pete has one, feels like he's got one over on them because he became famous anyway.
That was funny. I'm sorry, Mary. I didn't mean to offend you. Go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry, what was the question, dear?
Does he feel like he has one over on them because he became famous anyway?
Well, I don't put myself in the category of being famous, you know, in the same parallel as them.
I don't think
but,
they sit up and worry about Pete, do they?
No, I don't think so.
I doubt it. Troy, New York. Hello.
Hi, Pete. This is Ann.
Hello there, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad.
I'm just calling. I just wanted to say we really enjoyed your show last night.
You did a show last night, an
Russell
appearance?
said, yeah, we did a lecture there.
And we were proud to be your first stop.
Well, it was a great pleasure being there, and, you know, you were great company and you were a great crowd, and I'd like to come back again and do another one if it can be arranged.
Well, sure, we'll work on that.
Okay, try and get to New Haven next week anyway.
Thank you. Minneapolis. Hello.
Hi, this is Keith. Hi, Pete.
Hi, how you doing?
Great to talk to you. I just want to say, I think I'm Gonna Knock on Your Door is like the greatest single.
Well, we thought a lot of it when it came out as well, but it's nice to hear someone backing me up on that one.
Thought it was excellent, and I thought it was great to hear. That was Pete Clark from the Escorts, right?
That's right.
Called you. And I just wanted to know if you'd like make a few comments on the Liverpool scene from that time. You know, the Big Three, the Mersey Beats, and
Well, there were groups which, you know,
favorites, and the whole.
what, round about that time? Well, I mean, all the bands in Liverpool, I mean, Jerry, the Big Three especially, you know, with Johnny Hutch pounding away on drums. I mean, that went without saying. The Undertakers, another great band to come out. Searchers, you know, you could name them, go on all night talking about them, basically.
Well, I'd just like to thank you.
Okay, then.
Thank you. New York City. Hello.
Yeah, New York. Pete Best, first I want to congratulate you on being a very strong-willed individual, because I don't know how many human beings could go through what you went through and still climb to the top. Because
thank you.
if I knew that I had almost become a Beatle, or I was a Beatle, and then as they, you know, caught that ride to such fantastic success without, you know, being part of it, I don't know how many people, you know, could do that and not commit suicide or something like that. Somewhere along the line, did you ever, you know, really get down?
Yeah, he discussed that earlier.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
did.
it was mentioned. There was certain moments in my life when I did foolishly attempt to take my life, but...
You actually attempted it.
Attempted it, yeah.
May I ask one other thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because I am interested in hearing your answer, but I also want to ask this question, because I did tune in late. Did any of the Beatles ever offer to write you a song, or, you know, Lennon-McCartney tune and said, you know, hey, Pete, you know, in other words, to make up to you, why don't you do this song, or why don't you record with us, or why don't you get in, or we're throwing you some studio work or something like that?
No, there was no offer at all.
Nothing.
Nothing at all whatsoever.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Hello.
Hello, Peter. My name is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
It's a pleasure to hear you, especially because I've always enjoyed the Scouse accent.
The what accent?
The Scouse accent.
Scouse.
I know Liverpool before the Beatles was really known for comedians, and maybe if you have time later you could tell us a joke. Something that sounds funny in the Liverpool accent. My question, though, is, could I hear a little bit more about Stu Sutcliffe?
About Stu?
Even though he wasn't much of a musician, he's sometimes been mentioned as being perhaps brighter than even John or the other Beatles.
Stu was a clever lad. Don't take that away from him. But his main talent was an artist, as I mentioned before. He was a brilliant artist. It stood out in those days, and that was one of the reasons why, in fact, he left the band.
He liked that better in music.
Yeah, I mean, that was his first love, apart from Astrid, you know, the girl he fell in love with.
Tampa, hello.
Good evening, Larry. Good evening, Pete.
Good evening.
I have two questions for you. First of all, looking and listening to him,
Julian Lennon is strikingly similar to John Lennon. I wonder, are you friends with him, and what do you think of his music?
I've never met Julian in person. I've heard him on record the same as what you have done. But as regards his music, I think he's going to mature and become a very talented person.
Now, the second runner-up to the Pope, and of course Walter Mondale, probably look at the President and the Pope now and say, that could have been me. How often do you, or have you ever sat down and looked at Ringo Starr and just think that this guy was on a joyride and really was part of music history? And by the way, thank you very much for being a part of the Beatles.
Oh, thank you. It's something, in the early days I'd sort of reflect on it and turn around and said, there, but for the grace of God, go I. But it's something which you've got to switch off and just develop your own lifestyle.
Niagara Falls, Ontario. Hello.
Yeah, hi, Pete. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
I'd like to ask about if you ever ran across some of the other drummers during the big British invasion into America, like from the Stones and who you thought was the best. I'll hang up and listen.
Well, we did cross paths, Charles Watts and, Keith Moon. We have, bumped into one another. But one of the guys I like was the guy who actually took over Keith Moon's job, and that was Kenny Jones. I think he's got great talent there.
Well, was there a drum wave out of Great Britain then?
Yeah.
A wave of drummers that came over with the rock bands? There was a British sound, was there not?
There was. This was a development of the Mersey beat. And then
the Mersey beat is what it was called?
The Mersey beat, yeah.
M-E-R?
S-E-Y. Taken from the River Mersey.
Yeah. And was it distinctly Liverpool or wider than that?
Well, initially it started off as Liverpool, but then when the Liverpool influence sort of spread and all the recording companies in London signed up Liverpool groups, the bands from down in London took over.
Pete Best is our guest. We'll pause for news headlines, a word from your local stations. We have a half hour to go. We'll get to as many calls as we can in that half hour. You can see him next weekend if you're in the New Haven, Connecticut area. Our special guest is Pete Best, an original Beatle. Gaithersburg, Maryland. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Pete.
Mm-hmm.
What an honor. I really can't believe this. I'm a Beatles fan from, I grew up with the Beatles. I still play music, as a matter of fact. I'm still playing the old tunes. I can't believe that I actually got through on the radio here.
You made it. Well, now you have to say something. That's the rules of the game.
Yes, sir. By the way, I think, is there any chance that you could play a song after the show tonight, play one of the Beatles songs?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
We're going to do that right at the top of the hour.
Okay, great.
Now, what's your question to Pete?
Pete, did you sing with the Beatles?
Yeah, I did a couple of numbers with them. One was Matchbox, and the other was Peppermint Twist.
Peppermint Twist and Matchbox.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any recordings of those?
No, I don't think so. They were just stage numbers. But I did vocalize after I left the Beatles. I've had records out with my own voice on it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, onward to Toledo. Hello.
Hi. I'll just ask the question and then hang up to listen to the answer.
Okay.
I know that you were the real heartthrob in Hamburg of the group. Were you still as popular after the Beatles fired you?
Well, I took a lot of fans with me.
Heartthrob answer.
I took a lot of fans with me, from the Beatles, but there was split loyalties. They liked the Beatles and they wanted to see me as well.
Woodland Hills, California. Hello.
Good evening, Larry. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Hi.
You're a great guy. My question for you is, I've always liked that early instrumental Cry for a Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really one of my favorites. I just wondered how they arrived at the name for that song, and were you playing on it?
Yeah, I was playing on Cry for a Shadow. It was, part of the original setup which got it going. And it took place, actually. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were playing in Germany with us, and Rory was a great fan of Cliff Richard and the Shadows. And they had a #1 hit out at that time called Frightened City. And he asked George, who was our lead guitarist, whether in fact he knew how Frightened City went. And George was taking the extract from it. And he started playing about with his vibrator arm, and we all joined in. And this particular melody came about. And it was one of the ones which, for some unknown reason, it sounded good to us. And we experimented with it on the German audiences. And later when Bert Kempford decided he wanted to record that particular number, he turned around and said, "What's it going to be?" And in view of the fact we'd been taking the mickey out of the Shadows, we turned around and said, "Cry for a Shadow." And it seemed simple to us.
Well, that's great story. Urbana, Illinois. Hello.
Hello. I'm a 16-year-old Beatle fan. I've been a Beatle fan since I was 8 years old, and I was born in February of 1971, so I'd like to think that I was at least conceived before the breakup in April of 70.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to...
You were conceived before they broke up. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I say. So, I'd like to point out to the guy that I think called from Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
He said his girlfriend was related to George somehow or something. It might be that George had a brother or something that lived in St. Louis that George went to visit when he was in his early teens. I think if I got that from my old...
That I don't know. I knew that George had a brother and he had a sister as well. Where they were, I mean, the brother I knew, his elder brother Peter, used to live in Liverpool. Whether in fact he's crossed over into the stateside now, I don't really know.
Or something. I'd also like to ask you, Pete, how did the Casbah Club do after the Beatles moved out?
It did very well. In fact, it became the showcase for all the top groups in Liverpool. And in fact, the Beatles came back and played there again.
Tacoma, Washington, hello.
Hello, Larry, great show.
Thank you.
Pete, this is an honor to talk to you. Pete, did many people kid around with Paul McCartney about his left-handed bass playing? Was that ever a problem or any type of big deal at all with people?
No, I think it was unique in those days, to be quite honest. You know, there weren't many left-handed bass players around. We ourselves in the band took the mickey out of him a little bit, you know, and when he used to have to sort of play Stu's bass and turn it upside down and, you know, call him the gammy-handed guy and all the rest of it. But it didn't detract from his bass playing ability. And in fact, when he got the Hofner cutaway, you know, the violin-shaped one, that was something which virtually took all the other bass players in Liverpool by storm.
Was that bass, that particular bass, the Hofner, was it difficult for him to find? Even, like you said, it was unique back then. Was it hard for him, or did it have to be specially made for him? Or
It was a bit of both, actually. I mean, he'd seen the shape because there was a new line coming out, but in view of the fact that it was left-handed, you know, there had to be a few alterations to it as regards, you know, where the sound picks were and all the rest of it. So he did it, and we brought it back to Liverpool.
San Diego, hello.
Yeah, hi. This is another Pete here from San Diego.
Hello, Pete.
I was kind of surprised when I read the book, the Love You Make, an Inside Story of the Beatles by Peter Brown and Stephen Gaines, that there seemed to be a lot of amphetamine use in your hamburger years.
Oh, sure, yeah.
How much did that influence the music? I mean, I'm not trying to be judgmental, saying it's bad one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because of the long hours, I know you guys had to do that. But how much did that influence the music?
Not a great deal. I mean, that was basically sort of pill popping in those days. And it was more just to sort of, you know, keep your stamina up as opposed to sort of enhancing your musical ability.
Oh, because I know there was a lot of talk about how pot and LSD later influenced the Beatles.
Yeah, I mean, but okay, if you're talking about amphetamines, I mean, all they were basically were, you know, sort of diet pills. So all they did was sort of boost your stamina, kept you going, kept you awake for a little while.
San Diego, hello.
First of all, Larry, I've been listening to you for a long time, and I love you.
Thank you.
Mr. Best, I first heard the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, February of 1964. I was 10 years old. It changed my life. I am still a musician and songwriter, so thank you for whatever part you had to do with them getting to that point.
Well, thank you.
Very nice.
I read the Ray Coleman book on John Lennon. I don't know if you read it or not. They make him sound, as a youth, and late teens, early 20s, as a kind of a monster. Do you have anything to
Well, you said earlier there were two sides to him, right?
Yeah, I think it depends what source, you know, Ray. I mean, it's a good book, don't detract from that. But whatever sources he's got and whoever he sort of received the sources from, they painted John in an image which, okay, I mean, he was a tearaway, he enjoyed himself, you know, he had his fights and all the rest of it. But there was another side to John which hasn't been portrayed in the book.
Our guest is Pete Best. We have 20 minutes to go. Get to as many calls as we can. First, these messages. Kernersville, North Carolina, for Pete Best. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Pete, I used to hear a lot of talk after the Beatles became famous about the influences they had, and they named Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry and the Everly Brothers, and you could hear some of that in their early music, and maybe in the late 60s they went way beyond that. Was there really an influence of these people?
Oh, sure. I mean, that goes without saying. All the American greats, Ray Charles, Fats Domino, you know, they've just named a few, basically. You know, the ones you've sort of just the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, we were influenced by them, and I think you can tell, you know, the early music, there's still influences there. And if you look at the songs they wrote as well.
Well, what was the basis of the influence? Was it the words, or was it the chord progressions, or what were they talking about?
I think they were talking about just the general feel of the music. I mean, they idolized those people, and whatever they did, the songs they did, because the way we played them was sort of like the equivalent of standard material. Okay, we did our own interpretations of them, which were more or less like a direct copy of it. So they were copying them, they were styling themselves on them, they were imitating them to the best of their abilities. And if you take all of that I mean, they'd sort of drawn from different sources, the talents of different individuals, and putting them all together. They were developing their own styles from other sources which had been, the beginning of them.
Good explanation. Montreal, Canada, for Pete Best. Hello.
Yes, hello. I was wondering, Pete, when you were associated with the band, with the group, who did you feel most closest to? I mean, out of the three Beatles.
Oh, definitely John. John and I sort of went way back, and as much as having a lot of fun. He used to come over to my house. I got to know him in Hamburg. We used to go and drink and fight together, and you name it. We had a lot of fun.
How old were you when you knew each other first?
Well, I first met John in 1958, so that was when he came down to actually open the Casbah. So we would have been around about 17.
Minneapolis, hello.
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
Pete.
Hello there.
Pete, after you were dropped from the Beatles, did you ever go see them play?
I went on one occasion to actually see them. That was the first time the BBC were going to do a broadcast, TV broadcast from the Cavern. And I think this is the one, if you've seen snips of that particular one, they're doing Some Other Guy. And I went down and I stayed in the cabin for about 20 minutes, and I just couldn't take it anymore. The feelings were coming back and the atmosphere was there, and I just had to get up and leave.
Oh, yeah. Salem, Oregon, hello.
Hi, what a pleasure to talk to both of you this evening. I would like to ask Pete, if you could talk to Paul or George today, what would you say to them?
What happened?
I've often thought about this, and I just couldn't give you, a proper answer.
You would,
I think
if
it'd be
you
a
were
natural
sitting alone with
reaction.
them, wouldn't you say what really happened?
I think we'd try to get to the bottom of it,
I
but I
would.
think it'd be a case of initially it'd just be accepting it and saying, how are things doing, break the ice and see what pursues from there.
Baltimore, hello.
Yes. I'm on the radio.
You are on the radio.
Yes, I wanted to ask Pete a few questions about the album with Tony Sheridan.
Sure.
Yes, I have that album, and I'm terribly impressed with it. I like. I've heard a lot of things about who was singing on some of those songs, particularly "Ain't She Sweet." I've been told it was John Lennon. I was told it was Tony Sheridan, and people have said it was Peter Best.
Who was it?
I'll answer that one for you. It was John. 100% John.
John.
Thank you. I wanted to say something that I thought that John was possibly one of the most, or probably the most important person in the most important group in the 60s that made that time period so important. And as you were saying earlier about the innovative sounds and so forth that you all were involved in, and you were part of that, I would like to congratulate you on being part of that. And I'd like to hear more of what you can say about John and his music and your friendship.
Well, we've discussed it a great deal, and I'm going to have to move along, though, but I appreciate it. Sarasota, Florida, hello.
Hi, Larry. Pete, great show.
Thank you.
Hey, I'd just like to ask Pete, what drummer did he idolize in his youth?
In my youth, it definitely had to be Gene Krupa. I modeled myself on him because he was a good, showman, great drummer, great driver.
He was, great showman. Tampa, hello.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Fine.
I've got a question for Pete. I wonder if you didn't sue the Beatles and the results of that suit.
Did you sue them?
Secondly, you talk about all these different relationships. How many people have asked you to come back and do something with them after they become independent?
Okay, I'll answer the first one because you lost me a little bit on the second one. Yeah, I did sue the Beatles for breach of contract, and also Ringo because he turned around and made some remarks that sort of portrayed me as being a drug addict. It was settled. The settlement which transpired wasn't what was at the end of it. Okay, the settlement was minor. What was actually going to be resolved was the fact that there was a withdrawal and an acknowledgement of the fact that he had been wrong in what he said. So I hope that answers that particular question for you.
Okay, Norfolk, Nebraska, hello.
Hi, Pete.
How you doing?
Fine.
Great.
I used to be stationed over in England in the Air Force, and being the Beatle fan that I am, I right away went to Liverpool and to Matthew Street, right? And I went to Grapes and drank there, and there was a club across the street from where the Cavern was called Brady's.
That's right, I know it.
And I had a good time drinking there, and they seemed to have a pretty good scene going there. And I was wondering about what you thought of the scene there today, and also about back in the 60s, like say in 67, when the Beatles came out with Sgt. Pepper, and later if you were a fan of theirs and like you actually maybe bought some of their records and...
Yeah, were you? Or were you too bitter at that?
No, I mean, let's be honest about that. I haven't bought every record which came out, I'll be totally honest about that one, Larry. But there's certain songs which, I've liked and I've gone out and actually purchased them.
Really?
Yeah.
Pete Best, our guest, will be back with our remaining moments with the original Beatle drummer, who will be next weekend in New Haven at the get-together of the New England Beatles Convention. He's also on a lecture tour of colleges. Back after these messages.
King.
With Pete Best, Lincoln, Nebraska. Hello.
Hello, Pete.
Hello there.
Hello. Pleasure to talk to you.
My pleasure, believe me.
I was wondering, I got into the show here a little late. I don't know if this has been asked already, but do you associate with any of the remaining Beatles at all?
No, we actually answered that one before. They've gone their way and I've gone mine. There's been no contact whatsoever.
Hollywood, California. Hello.
Hello, my name is Doug, and I would like to ask about the university appearances. Do you play the drums at them?
What do you do at the University of Paris?
Well, it's a media. I mean, there's videos, introductions from musical clips, records.
And you take questions and talk.
Questions and answer sessions.
But you don't physically play the drums.
Well, we might incorporate it into it, but as it stands at the present moment, it's a no.
But if you had drums at the school and you put them on stage, you
never know. You never know.
What the hell? All right, Atlanta. Hello.
Hello, Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, does Pete still see Mike McCartney since Mike is still a resident of Liverpool?
I still see Mike, yeah. We still have a laugh and a joke together.
He's a crazy guy.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. San Francisco, hello.
Hello. It's a pleasure to talk to the real fifth Beatle. A lot of people have claimed to be the fifth Beatle over the years. I think Pete is actually the real one. I'd like to know if Pete ever had an opportunity to work on any records that George Martin produced, and what is his opinion of George Martin's influence on the Beatles?
Well, working on a record which George Martin produced goes back to the old syndrome of, yeah, there was a version I did of Love Me Do. So that's most probably the closest one. Also made P.S. I Love You and Beso Me Mucho with him, which came out on the Sessions album as well. But as an A&R man, I can only sort of gauge it from the first time I ever met him. I mean, it was the only time I ever met him, actually, to be quite honest, because I never went back to put the finishing touches to it. But he was a guy who was different in image from what we sort of imagined an A&R man to be. You know, he was sort of a suit collar and tie man, so to speak, which we'd sort of turn around and say was similar to Epstein's approach. But he seemed to know at that stage the sound which he wanted from the Beatles, and I think that was the impressive thing about it.
Mount Clemens, Michigan, hello.
Hello, Pete. I was just wondering if you saw their movies, Hard Day's Night and Help, and what you thought of them when you saw them.
Help was the one I liked best. Hard Day's Night was a little bit tongue-in-cheek for me, but I could see what they were trying to do. But I thought Help, the soundtrack, the colour in it, and the actual storyline itself was something to be, it was a good spectacle. I really enjoyed watching it.
Thank you very much to Salina, Kansas. Hello.
Mr. Best, Mr. King, it's a pleasure. One
Hi.
question, sir. You think if you tried to get in touch with Mr. McCartney and Mr. Harrison, would they take your calls?
I don't know. Maybe someone might try on my behalf. We'll just have to wait and see.
I would guess they would. Time goes by.
Well, it'd be interesting.
Everybody here is in middle age, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Lincoln, Nebraska. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering what Pete was doing during the Summer of Love and what he thought of the Sgt. Pepper album when it came out.
Sgt. Pepper lost it for me slightly. It was the turning point. I could see what they were going to do or what they were trying to do as regards the change in the musical directions and their own influences. But for me, sort of knowing the lads previously to that, it wasn't the Beatles as I would like to remember them at that present moment in time.
The schedule is what? You're going to go back to England and then arrange lecture tours and come back? In other words, we're going to be seeing lots of you in the States, huh?
Well, I hope so, yeah. It looks as though we should be back early February, I think.
How do you explain this incredible attention to this group that goes on and on? This group has not been together in 17 years.
I think it's something which is the charisma which the band, had. The fact that, as you turn around and said, they haven't performed, yet the
one is dead.
They
haven't performed in 17 years.
The records
they had a different
still
drummer to
going
start with.
They're all doing their own solo careers now. The records are coming out. They're coming out on CDs. different labels. It's nationwide. Conventions, you can see the influences because you can go around, you can see the generation gaps.
Yeah, what age groups, how big the span that'll come next weekend?
It's amazing actually to actually be there. You get people in the 60s down to kids of 4 or 5, you know.
That wide a range?
It's incredible. I mean, the first time I went, which was the convention last year, I just sort of looked round. It was mind-boggling. I mean, okay, you expected, you know, a certain amount of age group or people around about the same age as yourself, but the age gap and the generation gap was, you know, incredible to, you know, just sit down and watch it.
And the interest on campus, obvious.
Yes, that's incredible as well. But it's one of these funny things. I mean, people turn around and say, oh, there's not going to be a need for conventions anymore. There's not going to be a need for personal appearances. But yet, something always comes up year after year after year. I mean, this year was the 20th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper. Next year it'll be something else. They're discovering new dates, so there'll always be something going on. It's just one of those phenomena.
And your family as well, everybody's well? You're over the business, you're happy?
Yeah, I mean, they are a great family, both my, you know, personal family, my wife and 2 daughters, and, you know, my brother's families and everything. We've got a good social thing going for ourselves.
It's always nice having you here, and I thank you very much, Pete.
Larry, it's a pleasure being here, believe me.
Pete Best, the original Beatle drummer. If you want information, next weekend, the 29th, the weekend of the 27th, 28th, 29th, he'll be at the New England Beatles Convention. That's at the Park Plaza Hotel in New Haven, Connecticut. For information, 203-865-8131. And for college lecture information, 216-974-9100.